Tonight, you're going to do something your ancestors never could. You're going to stay up past midnight. Maybe you'll scroll through your phone, maybe you'll watch something on a screen, maybe you'll just sit under electric light and feel completely normal about it. And that's the problem, because for 300,000 years, for the entire stretch of human existence before about 150 years ago, the night was not yours to fill. The night was something that happened to you, something you survived, something you navigated with fire and fear, and a set of rituals so deep and so old that we've completely forgotten they ever existed. So the real question isn't what ancient humans did at night. The real question is, what did they become because of it? Let's start with something you've probably never experienced. True darkness. Not the darkness of a bedroom with the curtains closed. Not the darkness of a power outage where the neighbor's porch light still bleeds in. I mean the darkness of an African savanna 50,000 years ago, on a moonless night, with no fire, no torch, and no artificial light source within 500 miles. In that darkness, you cannot see your hand. You cannot see the ground beneath your feet. You cannot see the eyes of the thing watching you from 30 meters away. That was the default condition of human life. Every single night, for almost the entire history of our species. And yet here we are. We survived. More than survived, we built languages and religions and civilizations, and this video you're watching right now. And an enormous part of that story happened at night. In the dark. Around fires that our ancestors kept burning not just for warmth, but because the fire was the difference between existing and being eaten. So let's go back. Let's go all the way back to where it started. And it starts, like so much of human history, with fire. The earliest solid evidence of humans controlling fire comes from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa roughly 1 million years ago. Ash layers, burned bones, the unmistakable signature of something that knew what it was doing. But fire didn't just keep the cold out. Fire restructured the entire human day in a way we've never fully appreciated. Here's what life looked like before controlled fire. You were, behaviorally, not that different from a chimpanzee. When the sun went down, you found safety a tree branch, a rock ledge, a dense cluster of vegetation, and you stopped moving. Full stop. Because moving at night in the African savanna was a death sentence. Leopards are adapted for darkness. Hyenas hunt in packs after sunset. Lions are crepuscular predators, most active at dawn and dusk. Your eyes, by contrast, are among the worst of any primate in low-light conditions. The night belonged to the things that wanted to kill you. Fire changed that equation. Completely, permanently. Here's what researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer groups in sub-Saharan Africa have documented. A campfire creates a circle of genuine safety approximately 30 feet in diameter. Inside that circle, large predators will not come. The combination of light, heat, and smoke triggers avoidance behavior in virtually every apex predator humans would have encountered. 30 feet. That's it. That's the entire margin between the world of the living and everything else. But inside those 30 feet, something extraordinary started happening. People had nowhere else to go. No phones, no separate rooms, no tasks that required daylight. They sat. They stayed together. And they talked. And that changes everything. In 2014, anthropologist Polly Wiesner published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. She had spent decades working with the Jew Hoansi Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert, one of the last remaining groups on Earth still living something genuinely close to a pre-agricultural lifestyle. And she did something deceptively simple. She recorded and coded their conversations across different times of day. The results were striking, almost unsettling. During daylight hours, about 80% of conversations were practical. Who's hunting where? Which water source is holding? Disputes over resources, social negotiations, the logistics of survival. Daytime was work. Even the talk was work. But at night, around the fire, the character of conversation transformed completely. At night, 81% of conversations were stories. Not gossip, not logistics, stories in the full, rich sense of the word. Distant people in distant lands. Heroic hunts. The origins of the world, the behavior of gods and spirits and the forces that governed rain and drought and death. At night, people imagined. Wiesner's argument, and it's a significant one, is that firelit evenings were the birthplace of human culture. Not culture as in art museums and classical music, culture as in the shared symbolic world that makes us us. The beliefs, the myths, the moral frameworks, the sense of a past that stretches back before your birth, and a future that extends past your death. The campfire was the original theater. The campfire was the original classroom. The campfire was the original church. It was where your ancestors sat, night after night, and slowly built the stories that would eventually become religion and law and literature and history. It was where someone first told a story about a great flood, or a trickster god, or a hero who descended into darkness and came back. All of that started around a fire, in the dark, because there was nowhere else to go. But the night wasn't only stories. Because here's something we've almost entirely forgotten about pre-industrial life. Night was a time of genuine productivity. Just a different kind of productivity than we recognize today. Across cultures and across centuries, researchers have documented a consistent pattern. The hours after dark, before sleep, were the hours for the work that required the fewest resources and the most people. The collaborative work, the manufacturing work, the work that needed hands more than light. Anthropologists studying traditional societies in Papua New Guinea, the Amazon basin, and sub-Saharan Africa have found the same patterns again and again. Evenings around fire were when tools were made and repaired, sharpening, binding, weaving. They were when hides were processed, when nets were mended, when food was prepared for the following day's hunt. This wasn't grudging. It wasn't killing time. It was the natural rhythm of a day organized around light. The high-precision work tracking, hunting, gathering plants whose identification required good color vision that was for daylight. The tactile work, the social work, the crafting work, that was for firelight. And here's something important. This division had profound consequences. Because working together in the dark by firelight is an inherently intimate and cooperative act. You can't spread out. You can't go off to your own corner. You are physically gathered, close, sharing warmth and light and breath. Your attention naturally moves between your hands and the people around you. Researchers who study the evolution of human cooperation argue that this nightly forced proximity, thousands of generations of it, is part of what makes us uniquely collaborative as a species. That our capacity for large-scale trust and social bonding wasn't just a product of our big brains. It was a product of the fire circle, the nightly gathering, the irreducible togetherness of the dark. We were shaped by sitting together in the night. Now we need to talk about sleep, because this is the part that changes how you see your own life. You were not designed to sleep the way you sleep tonight. In 2001, historian Roger Eckerk published a paper that rewrote what we thought we knew about human rest. He had spent 16 years combing through historical records, prayer books, court documents, medical texts, diaries, letters, literary works, stretching back centuries. And in those documents, he found something that translators had been quietly editing out for generations. Over 500 references to something called first sleep and second sleep. Before artificial light became widespread, humans did not sleep in one continuous block. They slept in two distinct phases. First sleep began shortly after dark, perhaps an hour or two after sunset. It lasted roughly 4 hours. Then, people woke. Not from nightmares, not from illness, not from insomnia. They simply woke, as if that was the plan. Because it was. They stayed awake for 1 to 3 hours, sometimes called the watch or the quiet, and then returned to sleep for another 4 hours until dawn. This was not a disorder. This was the default. A 16th century French physician named Laurent Joubert wrote that the best time for couples to conceive children was during this middle-of-the-night waking period, because both parties were refreshed and rested. Medical manuals from the same era recommended the watch as the ideal time for prayer, reflection, and the reviewing of dreams while they were still fresh. Ordinary people visited neighbors during this window, wrote in diaries, lay in the dark, and simply thought. The watch wasn't empty time to be endured. It was a distinct feature of the night, as expected and as valued as the meals of the day. Eckerk found these references across cultures in Homer's Greece, in medieval Europe, in colonial America, and realized that somewhere in the 19th century, as artificial light extended the evening and industrial schedules enforced rigid working hours, the two-phase sleep pattern had simply collapsed and nobody had noticed, because everyone forgot at the same time. But here's the extraordinary part. In 1992, psychiatrist Thomas Ware at the National Institute of Mental Health ran an experiment to test exactly this. He took a group of volunteers and removed all artificial light from their lives. For 1 month, they experienced 14 hours of darkness every night, the same conditions their ancestors lived with. Within weeks, without any instruction or suggestion, every single participant settled into the same pattern. 4 hours of sleep. 1 to 3 hours of waking. 4 more hours of sleep. Their bodies simply remembered. But Ware measured something else too. He took hormone samples during that middle-of-the-night waking period, and what he found in their blood during the watch was unlike anything seen in normal waking consciousness. Elevated prolactin, the same hormone released during meditation, during orgasm, during the deepest states of religious contemplation that monks and mystics have sought for centuries. The watch wasn't just a gap in sleep, it was its own state of consciousness. A state of consciousness that existed inside every human being who had ever lived, right up until roughly 150 years ago. A state so calm, so reflective, so unlike anything in our waking day that people across cultures and centuries described it in almost mystical terms. And it's gone. Not because our bodies stopped producing it, not because evolution selected against it, but because we turned the lights on. And while we're talking about what we lost, we need to talk about the sky. Tonight, if you live in any city or suburb on Earth, you will not see the Milky Way. You might see the moon. You might see the brightest planets. On a good night, you might see 50 stars. Your ancestors saw 10,000. The Milky Way wasn't a thing you drove 3 hours to a national park to witness. It wasn't a photograph. It was the sky. Every single night, in every culture on Earth, the night sky was an enormous, vivid, moving map of the cosmos directly overhead. The Milky Way was so bright it cast shadows. Think about what that means. Think about looking up every night of your life at a river of light that stretches from horizon to horizon. Think about knowing, because your grandparents told you and their grandparents told them, the name of every major star, the shape of every constellation, the exact path of the planets through the year. Think about navigating by those stars, planting crops by those stars, telling time by those stars. The night sky was the original encyclopedia, the original calendar, the original GPS, and our ancestors read it with an intimacy we cannot imagine, because we have never seen it. The philosopher and naturalist Diane Ackerman wrote that the loss of the night sky is not just an inconvenience or an aesthetic tragedy. It's an epistemological rupture, a severing of the relationship between humans and the cosmos that stretches back to the very beginning of our species. Every ancient culture on Earth, Egyptian, Babylonian, Mayan, Aboriginal Australian, Greek, Chinese, organized enormous amounts of their intellectual and spiritual life around the night sky. Their calendars, their religions, their architecture, their agricultural systems all bore the imprint of the stars. We have none of that now. We have light pollution and sleeping pills, and a vague awareness that there's a big dipper up there somewhere. So let's bring it all together. Because this isn't just history. This is about what the night actually built in us. For hundreds of thousands of years, the night forced specific things to happen. It forced gathering because there was safety in the fire circle and danger beyond it. It forced storytelling because the night was long and the only technology for bridging the gap between minds was language. It forced making because tactile work in firelight built the tools that daytime survival depended on. It forced reflection because the watch, that quiet space between first and second sleep, was a recurring window of chemically induced calm that existed inside every human body every night. And it forced wonder, because when you live under an unobstructed sky, the cosmos is not abstract. It is present. Personal, overhead, these weren't incidental features of ancient life. These are the conditions under which human consciousness was forged. The sociologist Matthew Wolfmeyer has argued that our modern epidemic of what we call sleep disorders, insomnia, fragmented sleep, the sense that our rest is perpetually inadequate, may not be primarily a medical problem. It may be a cultural one. The architecture of our nights is so radically discontinuous with the architecture of almost every human night that came before it that our bodies are, in a sense, confused running ancient software on a completely foreign operating system. That 2 a.m. waking. That half hour of lying there in the quiet dark. What if that's not your brain malfunctioning? What if that's the watch? The same biological window that every one of your ancestors used to dream and reflect and pray and simply exist in the quiet before the world woke up again? What if the thing your doctor wants to medicate is actually the most ancient and human part of your night? Tonight, when the sun goes down, you'll flip a switch, and the night will be conquered. The dark will recede. The stars will vanish behind orange-lit sky. Your melatonin will be suppressed by the blue light of your phone. Your sleep will consolidate into one long block that your body has never fully accepted as natural. And you will not know what you've lost. You won't know the feeling of the watch, that warm, prolactin-soaked window of half-waking calm that every human before the industrial age experienced as a nightly gift. You won't know the campfire, the circle of 30 feet, the warmth of 12 people sitting close because the dark demanded it. You won't know the Milky Way as a road, a river, a map, a story vivid overhead, right there, every single night of your life. You won't know the kind of story that only gets told when there's nowhere else to go and no one's leaving until dawn. Our ancestors didn't fight the night. They didn't flood it with light or fill it with content or try to use every hour of it for productivity. They surrendered to it. And in that surrender, they built something we have still not figured out how to replace. They built culture, real culture, the kind that lives inside people and not on screens. They built trust, the kind forged by decades of sitting close together in the dark. They built wonder because wonder doesn't survive fluorescent lights. And they built an inner life because the watch gave them. Every single night, the space to have one. We traded all of that for the light switch. And we called it progress. Most of us never even knew it was gone.